was like, not yet. Not
I
right
don't know
now.
if I told you I'm closer now. I'm over New Braunfels now.
Oh yeah, that's
So
right.
yeah,
I
just
found a new
we're
karaoke
almost
place
one
that's south,
city.
so
What's
yeah.
that?
I found a new karaoke place that's further south, so we can maybe meet
Oh,
there.
we gotta make it
It's
happen. I know we talked about we were so close last time and life got so distracted, but we got to make that happen for sure.
we will
So
definitely.
there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Any chance you happen to be friends with Mark Stern or Chandler Bolt?
Not Mark Stern. Chandler sounds familiar, but no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't recognize them.
I'm gonna see if Mark Stern can come for that too. I don't know Chandler personally. He's a friend of a friend, and
Mhm.
he's he's in the book publishing business. He does selfpublishing.com,
Okay.
and very well known in that space. But these are people who are like super fun entrepreneurs,
Nice.
and Carlos Sarmiento. I can see if I get him there as well. But we should make a thing out of it, like and just
Mm.
finally
That'd
make
be
it
fun.
happen. I got a small thing, of course, but like we were going to last time, and then it's just
Yeah, I
ah,
want entrepreneurship and business to be fun again, especially
yes.
around the posting of content. So I've been doing a lot of collaborations that are kind of unique. So that's what I want to keep doing to have more fun with business because it's been like a Debbie Downer sometimes. So yeah,
Are you a musician by chance?
I'm becoming one.
Becoming one.
Well, I'm
Good.
not, but like, okay, I'm not a rapper, but like, I'm going to go record 2 rap songs, and one of them is Messy Goddess. But so I'm not a rapper, but I'll record some songs.
I like it. No,
Yeah,
I get that. I'm a closet musician.
yeah.
Right.
Well,
So like, I mean, I'm not that closet.
not
I got my
closet. You have
guitar
a
here,
baby, a guitar.
but I wouldn't I wouldn't go on stage and perform for a bunch of people. Like that terrifies me.
I know. I
But
get
recording something and really, yes, I've been slowly kind of doing that. So the reason why I
nice.
mention it is Vic Wheeler of Flutarian.
Hmm.
He's got this new podcast, and on the podcast, he brings musicians on. He does like a partial show, and they play a song together.
Hmm.
And he improvises on the flute while they play, and
That's
then
cool.
he takes another segment. They talk again, and they play another song together. Like it's like this
Like a
experiential
jam
thing that I've been like,
session.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. So they're fun to produce. He produced a video of my daughter playing the piano with him
Oh,
playing the
cool.
flute, and gave it to her on her birthday. So, oh
That's so
man,
special.
that makes a dad cry right there
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Wow.
for
That's really
sure.
unique.
He's
Wow.
an Austinite, so well,
Of course.
yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna be talking about leadership in the face of change. Probably talking about embracing change and how that's a healthy thing, but also sometimes turning a blind eye to change. Or saying, you know what, I need to stay focused can
Hmm.
matter too. And for those of you who don't know, Thea's been on our show now. Have you been on here twice? No, I was on your show and you came on. This is the second time, but like our relationship and friendship just I don't know how to put it other than like I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be your friend for life right after we met the first time. So I was like, and you got the podcast skills and the old Facebook experience and stuff. Um, there's just a lot to your path and what you've done where I was like, man, I got so much I can learn from you. So we're gonna do that today. We're gonna dive into leadership. We talked about 3 resources you recommend last time. Let's start with what are 3 leadership tips that are often overlooked, specifically by visionaries or by executive leaders?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's juicy. Um, from my experience, so mind you, like my background's learning and development as well, and so I was creating courses and trainings for C-suite executives. So I was like, this is a juicy question.
Yeah, I'm like, you're the perfect person to ask this for. Thank you for
Yeah,
teeing that back up so people know the context. Yes, you are the
yeah.
one to answer this.
So one thing I will say is like that having a consistent feedback loop and not tying feedback specifically always to like a performance cycle, right? So for instance, if you know you're going to review your team, they shouldn't be surprised by the time you get to the performance cycle. Like they should know what's coming, right? So I would definitely say like feedback, and I know that sounds more corporate because I was talking more corporate, but if you have, people that you've hired into your business, like I have a virtual assistant, I am often like recognizing her and letting her know how she is doing, right?
Yes.
Somebody commented on a post of mine today, and they were like, I love the branding on this. And I was like, yeah. Michelle is a rock star, and I tagged her because she's the mastermind behind the post, And so I definitely think like giving that constructive feedback often and frequently, sometimes it goes overlooked, or people feel like you should already know you're doing a good job, you're not fired, like, so, but people need that feedback often, even
They
if they
have
know they're good
to.
at something.
I literally had to have a hard conversation with a client we work with today.
Hmm.
This exact subject, where we felt like we've been crushing it, and the sentiment expressed, was more of a, yes, and I want clarity on this, that, and the other, and talking to him about how, you know, that robs the team of being able to celebrate their victories, right? Going to the weekend knowing that they did well.
Yeah.
And so if we do that as leaders and we don't give people the opportunity to understand what is good, they will probably dive into fears and
Hmm.
wonder like if they're really appreciated or not.
Exactly.
And when they find somebody who comes along that does take care of them, they're gone, right? They're going to go where they're going to be appreciated.
Yeah.
And so we have a huge opportunity. That's a big one. Thank you.
Mhm.
I also need to be more careful to be. John Gottman of the Gottman Institute with marriages talked about how if we can flip the script and start saying 5 positive things
Yeah.
for every 1 negative thing that we say,
Ooh.
like that's the formula to making marriages last. Well, the same thing for all relationships. He aims for 20-1 with his wife. That's what him and his wife dedicate themselves to do, is 20 great things, positive things for every 1 critique.
It's so interesting that you say that too, because I saw a video on Instagram the other day, and this guy on a podcast with these other guys that are his friends, and he's like, my wife, I came into the kitchen, I told her I was going to Costco, and she said, "Oh, kiwis are on sale." And so then I said to her, "What you mean to say is kiwis are on sale. Can you bring me some?" And the guys on the podcast were like, he was so hell bent on making his wife like at fault, right? Which again, sometimes we're all doing a million and one things, and yes, she could have
Yeah.
communicated better, but like that wasn't the intent of her. She wasn't trying to, be a nuisance. And so they corrected him, and they were like, "Well, you both were wrong, but he's like, but she was wrong too." Like, and he was so stuck in that. And I was like,
Uh,
this is so interesting, but like
Huge.
finding ways to be positive. And I was like, that's such a small thing that could really blow up a relationship for no reason. And so
Yes, it is.
appreciating the good things, all of them, even if they're small.
Huge. I rewrite things like I write something and then I literally like move the words every time. I'm like, man, I sound like a jerk. I meant to put this here. I'm like, okay, now, oh yeah, I forgot to say happy Monday, right? I go
Mhm.
back, or, hey, great. I hope you're having a great Friday, right? Just
Yeah.
we can overlook those things when we're trying to be productive.
Yeah.
But it can very much kill a relationship if we're going that fast that we lose sight of the
Mhm.
relationship. So I love that you're talking about that. What's number 2? That was juicy.
Overlooking the basics.
Mm.
So I've hosted trainings sometimes before on things like communications or storytelling. And, sometimes you have a lot of leaders come in and they kind of roll their eyes, and they're, they're just not, they're like, we've been through this. And I think the mistake that,
When are we going to get to the real stuff?
well, okay, so
No, I'm saying that's what they say, right?
yeah,
Like,
that's what they say. Definitely. They're
I'm
like,
not
"Well,
saying that. I love this stuff. The basics are where we live. I'm a Tim Duncan fan, right? We
yes.
go fundamentals. Oh,
Mhm.
so
The
go ahead.
fundamentals. That's exactly what it's about. And I think this was probably 2 and 3. So they're overlooking the basics, right? When you go into a training, you should always have at least 3 to 5 outcomes that you want to get out of it. And whenever I do that, I often walk away with something, even from a course that I've already been in before, or a speaker I've already heard. I've walked away with something new. And to piggyback on that, the third thing would be, you know, when you go into trainings like that, go into it for your team. So, like, where is your team at right now? Think about what they could use from it, what they need. And it's not just all about you. It's like, yes, you have mastered a lot of the basics, but sometimes we need a reminder, one. But also, sometimes our teams are who we're going into this for, because we're in a different place than where, we're in a different place than where they are right now. And so it reminds us to go back and say, hey, this is actually what they might need in the moment. So I would say that that's 2 and 3.
That is so huge. I got 4 out of what you just
Oh,
said, so
okay. What were the
I'm the
4?
lucky winner. The consistent feedback loop, the overlooking the basics, right?
Yeah.
Trying to speed past them. And the 3 to 5 outcomes, right? Establishing that up front, the 3 to 5 outcomes that you want to get out of the experience, I'm sometimes overlooked that, and just kind of go in knowing like, oh, well, everybody's going to be on the same page about what we're doing. And that's a very naive thought as a leader. And so I'm very guilty of that. When I wrote that down for me, I'm like, okay, I'm taking that one. And then the other one too, going into it, at your team, just kidding, for your team. We
Yeah.
as leaders think we show up for our team, but in reality, our selfish agenda, right, and the outcome, is what matters. And we got to get the outcome. And if we don't take control and dive in fast and resolve this, everything's going to be catastrophic. Yet when we do that, we end up creating a catastrophe because we came at our team instead of to them, right? And so I'm in the process too of learning, like, okay, there's so much that I really want out of this meeting, but is this person okay? What's going on in their life? Let me just put that aside, Jackson, right? And say, I know what I want now. Now I'm going to have my 3 to 5 things I want. So if they ask, I can be clear with them. But I need to be able to show up and say, hey, John, how are you today? What is on your agenda? What things do you need? And I'd add into executives and business owners that one challenge that exists there with new relationships is if you don't have the same framework in mind for how things go and you have different ways of approaching leadership, some leaders can assume that you don't have an agenda or assume that you don't know what you're doing and you're looking for them to bridge those gaps. And that's a different communication challenge all of its own. But that's why we have leaders like Thea to turn to and be like, hey, let me consult with how much can I hire you to consult with me and help me fix these things and figure these things out. So those are fantastic tips. Those of you listening right now, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to dive into Thea's vision and again, even more about leadership in the face of change and what that looks like and what her brand has evolved to, brands have evolved to, and we'll be right back after this break. All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We'll be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. What's up, and welcome into another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Callum, founder and CEO of First Class Business, and I'm super excited to have Thea back on the show today. She's got a couple of different brands, from the one that's coming out, and it's coming soon. In October, you'll see the messygoddess.com go live. You've got her Patreon account, patreon.com/goddesshood. Goddesshood is where it's at. She's got a podcast. She's got a couple podcasts from the past two, one that I got to be on, and then goddesshood.co as well. We're talking about a leader who's worked with the likes of Facebook, for instance, who's also worked with C-level executives, who's really her depth of understanding the values and importance of the leadership principles that the visionary leaders that gravitate towards me, like I'm telling you right now, look at what Thea is doing, because she's the type of person that I turn to and I'm like, hey, can I give you a scenario and get your advice on this? I'm always looking for more leaders to surround myself with that can help me with the challenges that we face too with scaling our brands. So she is just that. Before we bring Thea back on stage, though, a quick shout out to and reference to some of the other programs that have really helped us and that we've fallen in love with and alignment with. One is Brain Glue by none other than James Bond. James I. Bond wrote Brain Glue, and Jack Canfield said, as an entrepreneur, you would be an idiot not to read this book. And he said this book should be in every marketing class in America. That's how great this book is. So definitely go check out and see what Brain Glue does and how it helps you emotionally connect with your audience. Whereas a lot of people who mean well and want to do good get stuck in the cerebral stuff. Right. There's an opportunity to connect with your audience better. And James Bond has unlocked some secrets on how to do it. And he's quite funny and witty. So definitely check that out. I laughed out loud, even just listening to the sample clip, and I received the hard copy of my book just last night. So I'm excited to dive in. Then there's Dave Morrow with the Hard to Kill podcast and hardtokill.org. He's helping 100,000 veterans lose 2 million pounds collectively. And if you know a veteran, definitely invite them to come and join. I'll say it, our community. We joined forces with Dave on this. He's opened the doors to civilians as well. I'm civilian. I'm super grateful for the armed forces and what they've done for me. I'm also grateful for a fairly dark movie. It was called Thank You for Your Service. And it showcases just how hard it is for military veterans to get reintegrated back into life. And once they lose their routines and they don't have access to that same camaraderie and community, and the VA doesn't necessarily do all that they can and should to help them get back on their feet. Well, we need to do something about that. So Dave he's launched that community. He's pulling veterans together. He wants to help them look good, feel good, and do good. And I love the way that he serves and leads. So definitely join us over there with that. Then there's the water project. The water project is not mine. I'm guilty for never being thirsty in my life. Granted, that's a huge blessing, but when I found out there's people who don't have access to clean drinking water, I decided we got to talk about this. We got to help people know that this is a reality that exists out there, not so we can be overwhelmed by life's problems, so we can jump in and help where we can. What I love about their organization is you get to pick the actual project you're going to support, and you get to see what they're going to do to bring it to fruition. They even include the community so they know how to sustain it long term. And once they finish the process of like building the borehole well or the sand dam, they send social proof. They send the pictures to show you what your money went towards. And seeing these kids celebrate water like my kids celebrate Christmas Day, like that's something worth meditating on and pondering and realizing you could have a multi-generational impact by giving back to something like this. If you have another cause that you'd also like to see us talk about and support, by all means, drop the cause in the comments. It's not a competition. There's a lot of people to help. We got 8 billion out there that we can help. So my hope is that you'll allow those of us who rock mics like this to jump in the game and help as well. There's lots of ways that we will commit to jump in the game. So without further ado, Thea, thank you so much for joining me on Vision Pros Live.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta have you back and back and back and back and back. We got all this leadership depth to dive into and solve the problems of the world out there. Really, we focus on that sometimes, but make life better, right? It's not just about solving problems. It's about amplifying what we can have. So in the face of change, what the heck does that mean? Which way are we going to go with this today, Thea?
I think I want to go in the direction of, knowing when to pivot, but also knowing, I guess, how to pivot and how to deal with that, especially around, when people have inputs or ideas about your pivots or comments or concerns about your pivots.
Yes.
I have gone through that a lot. So
that's totally fair. I've got to pull this up. Big shout out, by the way, to my old business partner, Cesar Torres, and rest in peace, our company named the Pivot Point. We got sued in a non-compete and lost. We shut the company down. He ended up reversing the lawsuit, winning. And we had already moved on for our different ventures. But pivot points happen all the time for entrepreneurs. So what a great topic, pivot points in leadership. Let's hear it.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll start with a personal reference, and I think that'll kind of help paint the picture of where we could go with this. But I remember, so I'm a California native, for those of you who don't know, born and raised. And I decided one day that I wanted to move to Texas, to Austin, Texas. So
yeehaw.
Yeah, yeehaw. Mm-hmm. I should have worn my hat. I have one now. But I remember so many people trying to deter me from moving. I had a friend say, well, you were only there one time. I came here for work for a couple of days, and I was like, I'm moving here. I don't know I have no idea what that looks like, but I'm moving here, And my friends just kept trying to deter me. Like, you've only been there one time. And I was like, well, I've never lived anywhere else. So, I probably should go try. And guess what? I can move back,
Uh-huh.
And so the things that I had to think about during that time were silencing the noise. I think there's times where you do need people's feedback, and it is valuable to, marinate on. However, we all have our own mission. We have our own vision. And you have to really tap into your intuition when making certain decisions. Like, it's great, to hear from other people. However, Goddesshood, my brand is about unleashing your inner goddess, right? And so you have to tap
Mhm.
into your inner goddess, your inner guidance, your inner voice.
Yes.
And so I have had to manage and navigate that a lot as I've pivoted. And with that pivot, coming to Texas has been the best decision I've ever made as far as making a move. And it was right before the pandemic. So it was like the perfect timing, like absolute perfect timing.
As a Texan, I am not due any honors in this, but I feel so honored. Um, it makes me so happy that you've liked our state at least. So and this is now your state, by the way. Once you've been here for a couple of years, we're like, nah, just call it home.
Well, apparently they say that for Californians it's 10 years. I've been here 5 years. I feel like that's
We're probably trying to drive Californians to slow down a little bit. You know, like there's a lot of them coming, so maybe that's it. But no, why do they? Who says that it's 10 years?
I heard that's the phrase around town. That's what people
Oh,
say.
is
Been here 10 years. I'm like,
it?
it's been 5 years. I feel like I put in some good time here.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. We love you.
Thank you.
So there's so you mentioned two in there. Oh, it reminded me of marathons. Because I was just talking again to another client yesterday about it. I said, listen, we were talking about training and practicing, and this entrepreneur had said they got one practice done over the weekend, and I was like, oh no. I was like, look, have you ever trained for a sport? And I said no. I'm like, okay. I said, well, a 7K. And they told me about their 7K and how they just ran for 5 minutes more every day until the 7K. I was like, well, that's not how marathon training works. You have to train, like either run the same type of miles for a long time before you can build up to the next. And entrepreneurship is 10,000 times harder than marathons. And so if you're going to train 1 hour per week, you ain't going to make it. Like that's not going to happen. Right now, where am I going with this on the marathon side? If we have friends and family that don't understand the marathons that we're on, right, and they see us in our 23rd or 24th mile, they're going to feel empathy.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to want you to slow down and stop.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we don't want you to hurt yourself. Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? And they can't see us in that marathon race because we're not in a physical marathon where everybody's clapping and cheering and trying to help. So I agree with you 100%. We have to be willing to tune out the noises and the distractions, whether it's somebody who's trying to coddle us or it's somebody who's trying to trip us up or distract us or hold us back. And
Mm-hmm.
that is not easy to do as an entrepreneur. And so there's a time where we're actually talking about where you don't pivot, right? Where you stay focused and keep going. So how do you know when is when friends or family or loved ones or team members are telling you that you should pivot? When do you know it's time to actually make the pivot?
Well, I'm all about, because of my personality, I'm all about weighing the decisions. So for me, sometimes I have to see it visually, right? So I don't always like, I guess I think my friends, they'll tell me stuff, but they don't know if I'm listening or not, you know? And so I'm always listening, just so everybody knows, I'm always listening. But sometimes I'll just write stuff down. I'll put it in my notes on my phone, or I'll put it on a piece of paper and I come back to it, you know? And that's kind of how I kind of start. That's like more of the mechanics behind it. But I know people aren't going to want to hear this because it's not an actual, it's a tip, it's a real tip, but it's very esoteric. And I think sometimes it's really hard for people to like see how those things work. But sometimes just being still and getting into a place where you can hear your own voice and you can meditate on things, because if something feels, if it feels anxious, if there feels like panic around it, like you're not in a state to actually weigh in on something. And so I've just learned not to make decisions when I'm, frantic or anxious, or like I'm like, oh my God, I gotta figure this out. And as soon as I start to feel like that, that's like a good indication of, okay, I need to take a step back, or this also may not be the right move for me, and trusting that. And I know that's hard to do, of just like trusting yourself and trusting your voice. But if you slow down a little bit sometimes, it doesn't mean like come to a full stop all the time, but just get into places where you can sit still. Make sure what you're putting into your body food wise also is like allowing you to hear. Because I've noticed like when I've cleaned up my diet and stuff around things, I can hear myself better. I can hear myself think. And so all that stuff influences you.
It's huge.
Yeah.
The whether it's esoteric or some other fancy word or not, I'm a big fan. And you've inspired me. I'm gonna do two things now. I'm tempted to go grab my guitar right now and play the song "Be Still My Soul." It is
Mm,
one of my favorite songs.
mm,
But I'm not going to do that to you guys. What I will do is tonight I will record myself playing that song and I will
mm.
post it.
I love
And those of you who want to suffer through it can suffer through it. Those of you who want to say, "Hey Jackson, you're doing great," go ahead. You can say that too. But that song and that thought process,
it.
like we have the answers within us most of the time.
Oh yeah.
And general counsel is not a bad thing, but um, general counsel, when it comes from somebody phenomenally like aligned with what we're doing, like
Mhm.
I'm also good with that, but their counsel to a general public may be completely adverse to what they would tell you in
Yeah.
your situation. And we
Mhm.
have it. So I hate having general conversations with people. Like I don't do well with small talk. So pivoting, knowing where to pivot, knowing when to escape it, and learning to be respectful in the process, I would say as well, can be helpful
Mhm.
with one's ability to stand their ground when
Yeah.
they're doing something that nobody else is like around them is getting around to supporting. So
Yeah.
let's take a pretty big pivot. I want to talk to you about the dark side. So the you've had lots of leadership experiences in your life.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've had lots of leaders that you've had to deal with versus wanted to work with too. What's the worst leadership experience that you've ever had?
Actually, okay. I have a one that pops into my mind. It's not the one I was going to share originally, actually, but um,
Cool.
I remember interviewing for this role, right? And the person didn't understand that I was asking a strategic question, not a. I wasn't trying to be messy when I asked the questions, put it like that. So there was this role that they were opening up at this company, and I was wondering why I didn't know if they were trying to look for internal candidates too. Like I was like, why isn't that this a in seat like promotion type of, because I wanted to know if I'm coming into this role as a manager, if I'm going to have people that are going to be kind of, upset with me
Yep.
about being in the role. So it was a very strategic question I wanted to know the answer to, right? And the interviewer kind of kind of shades me. It's like, well, we're just trying to, expand to everybody and give everyone a chance. So you need to think about it differently. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
so instead of asking a question
they
to
came
like
at you.
uncover more, I was like, whoa, I was like, I'm not trying to be messy with this, but if you want to be messy, we could be. I'm just kidding, but I was like, I wasn't trying to be messy with this. I was actually trying to understand what my challenges might be if I was coming into this role. Had you have asked me some questions around it, you would have understood that. But that's not the stance that they chose to take. So I think when someone has assumed they understand my intentions, but not actually asked what my intentions or asked more information on why I was asking a particular question,
100%. That's super common in
Mhm.
today's world. It's very, very common. So I'm curious, how did that play out?
Didn't get the job, thank
Okay.
goodness.
Well, good. Yeah. Thank you for
For
saying that.
good
Thank
reason.
goodness. Right.
Yeah.
Other people could look at that and be like, "Oh, well, she failed." No. That's a healthy boundary, right?
Yeah.
What was their response to your helpful insight? Right. You tried to help them see that that's not the angle you're coming from. I'm curious. Do you remember what they responded with, or was it like
Yeah, it was kind of
passive or?
it was passive. It wasn't really like a aha, like light bulb moment for them. But I did end up getting to talk to the hiring manager and give feedback about the overall process because I had other pain points which were great. And the hiring manager was very receptive to my feedback. And I was like, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but this was the experience. And asking more questions or giving more training around how to deliver interviews would actually help people because interviews should be standard. They shouldn't change, across the board in order to provide a fair and inclusive experience, right? So I was able to give that feedback and she was very receptive. But in the interview, the other person was like, they were like, whatever. I guess because they felt, attacked. They felt a little hurt. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But now
Yeah.
you know, so you'll ask questions next time,
Well,
So
hopefully they will. I mean, the challenge to that too is it's not a mechanic, right? Reality. It's a culture.
yeah.
And that's something very deeply rooted. If somebody is centered in who they are, right, and they have the strength of character to deal with a question that may seem offensive, that's when you have that ability to say, "Am I understanding this correctly?" And you can ask that question, remove the assumption, but unless the character trait or virtue is addressed, then they're going to find a new way to screw that up every single time that it happens. And I know that from screwing it up myself many times until I figured out, oh man, I'm not coming from a position of love on this. That's our strongest foundational virtue at First Class Business is, if I'm out of alignment with that, I need to be able to recognize that core reality, and then it makes it so much easier to deal with the circumstances.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I'm going to post a reel later on this week. And because it's been on my mind. I've said it before, but I felt like I needed to reiterate it that people are our biggest currency. And I know we want to make all the money. I know we want to do all the things, but we can't do those things without people oftentimes. And so just people are our biggest currency. And again, we're not doing it always for the things, for those things. However, like that is how things get done.
It is. I'm a second it. Do you mind if I do? Because I'm not. I want the audience to realize when the host and the podcast guests, when we do these interactions, I think sometimes people can think, oh, it's just a one-up scenario, but in reality, it's an honor of like, whoa, she just said something huge, and I've gotten to experience this recently. And whether it's me admitting like the pain of what I've screwed up on in relation to it, or it's me saying, hey, here's how this is being implemented, what I've seen with it, we have a big one today. So first off, huge shout out and birthday celebratory applause for Cynthia, whose birthday is tomorrow. Thank you, Cynthia, for helping us on this. That's right. So Thea knows she's in the back end helping us in the show right now. And I'll have fun celebrating with her about this in Spanish too. In our celebration at noon, 12:45 Central on Fridays, we have a meeting with our team called Level Up Calm Down. And in that meeting, it's break room time. We're there until 2, leveling up, still talking about things that might be important. We might karaoke. It does happen at times. Yeah. Oh, we have some fun. And celebrating victories, singing happy birthday to people, doing what we need to. But to your point, people are our biggest currency. Today was unique in that 2 weeks ago, I asked Deanna, who holds me accountable, I asked her to remind me, I said, hey, in our meeting, make sure that you remind me to talk about equity. She's like, okay, so last week we didn't get to it. I was like, okay, got it this week. So this week, today, Luisa, Maria Victoria, Andres, and Cindy all learned that they're on a track to earn equity in First Class Business. They all got their preliminary contracts on that. And then we got to upgrade and look at what does Cynthia own now? What does Jaime own? What does Sebastian own? And go through the ranks of Valentina and Diana as well, and Zach, etc. We are very, very big on investing in our people, and our people show up. Like they love to be here. They know that we care about their visions and where they go. And so when we look at it and say, you know what, it's not always, the paycheck, it's not always the bottom line. It's about making sure that the people that we have around us know how much they're appreciated, know they have the ability to input, and can start to really understand that this is not just my vision. It is our vision. It's amazing what we can accomplish when we do that. So I hope you do make that episode happen. I don't see many people doing that in the world of business.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. Wow. I'm just like taking it all in, all the compliments. It's exciting for your team. Wow.
Well, again, we wouldn't be where we were. We won't be where we're going without the people. The people are what make it happen. So
Wow.
Let's go into the best leadership experience you've ever had. So you've had a lot of great leaders in your life who've led you. You've had great leadership opportunities as well. What's the best one ever?
Oh, okay. This was my favorite role. It was the second time I went to contract back at Facebook. And I had this manager. This is when I was a business processes project manager. So I helped iterate the business processes for the whole department. And so I really liked working with this manager because every time we came to meet, he had this format of how we would run the meetings. And he would ask if there was anything I needed from him. And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, you just let me know if you need anything. And he would just get out of the way and let me do the work and let me make him look good. Let me make the team look good, myself look good. But he would just get out of the way. And I appreciated that so much because I remember I actually quit a job one time because I was brought in to up level the processes, right? And I go to pull out my computer to do what I do with the processes to kind of get everybody on the same page during the meeting. And the manager looks at me. He says, "Oh, so it's the Theodora show now." I was like, "Oh, it's time to go." I was like, "It is so time
Yep.
to go." I was like, "Because this is not gonna go well because you
No,
don't
it's
want me
not.
to do what I came here to do, what you hired me to do. So I'm gonna just exit stage left." And unfortunately, a few people left after me too. So I didn't tell them to leave, but they were like, "You're leaving, we're out." I was like, "Okay."
I have found that door at least 100 times, maybe even hundreds by now. Ryan, my new line is, look, I get that you want a fractional C level, but do you want somebody who actually knows what the C stands for?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want somebody who's just going to listen to everything you want them to do?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, we
Exactly.
don't do pretenders here. We work with contenders.
Yeah.
We work with chiefs,
Yeah.
who actually want to do the things and want the space to be able to do. I love what that leader did. Just, like, get out of the way.
Get
We
out of the way.
have to if we're going to put somebody in position who actually knows what they're doing, you can't then come up to LeBron James and say, just shut up and dribble,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you're going to find somebody who will do that, they have no capacity to lead.
No, none.
Well said. So that is a great insight. If this was the last chance that you had to give a powerful lesson for other entrepreneurs and visionaries out there, what would the lesson be?
Trust in your skills, like trust in your skill set and trust in not just your skill set, but who you are as a person. I feel like sometimes so many of our experiences in the physical don't really relate to who we are always in the spiritual. So if something is happening that is in the physical of like you're being rejected from something or you're being denied or stopped, that doesn't mean that you're not still on track in the spiritual. And sometimes those things just haven't caught up yet. And we have to be patient and just let it play out because yeah, there's so many times where I was like, oh, this thing didn't work out. I was actually in kind of a spell over the last 2 weeks, and I finally came out of it a couple of days ago. And because just some really good healing work that happened. And I was so bummed. But then when I looked up and looked around at what came out of that like decline for something, I was just like, okay, I hear you. I'm gonna be patient. I'm going to, let it all catch up. So I was just ahead of where I was supposed to be at that moment, and then kind of everything came back into alignment. So it doesn't mean I was off in my intuition. It just means I was a little early. That's all. So
Oh,
sometimes that stuff happens.
I know all too well. It was like
Hmm.
a therapy session for me, Thea. Uh,
It's been like that this week. I'm not gonna lie. It's been like that for all of us.
I'm getting the goods right now. Like, this is so trust in your skill set, and I love that you were like, and who you are as a person, because you're right. There are phases, right? There's stages that the stars kind of have to align in some regards. And so I grew up uh, very, very, very talented in sports and being really, really good at sports. And I wanted to be LeBron James. Man, that was supposed to be me, breaking that scoring record. Like, and no, it wasn't. It was not. I don't have that level of skill set. And finally admitting that to myself in the last year or two. But how and
Last year
why?
too.
I know. Yes, I'm finally starting to come to terms with that. You please laugh. It's worth it. I'm able to finally laugh at that. But I'm serious. Like, I've been like wondering about that and wondering about the music thing too. It's like, all right, Ed Sheeran, man, he took my career. Josh Groban, they got it. But as I've reflected back on life and started to see the past and the things that I've been able to do, the opportunities that I've had. Last year in a podcast, I admitted this story about how my stepsister convinced me to admit that I liked Barney at
Yeah.
6 years old, and then when I finally admitted it, they turned around and they made fun of me relentlessly, and that was the story of my life with my cousins and my step siblings. Like, it was a brutal environment to grow up with
Mhm.
as somebody who, so then, Bananas in Pajamas comes out and Teletubbies comes out, and I'm like, no, nothing to do with anything like that. And Blue's Clues and all those things. My best friend in high school, one of the coolest kids in school, was watching Blue's Clues in high
Mhm.
school, like in between playing Call of Duty, and
Good show.
I remember, no, like, I remember, no, like it, and he was like, what? He's like, Blue's Clues is amazing. And so I'd watch it with him, but I had this massive resistance within me. It was
Mm,
like, I ain't never telling anybody I did this, not even if it's with Mr. Cool.
mm,
Like
mm,
had this block. And JP Sears, right? JP Sears, a comedian on YouTube that does all of the spoof type stuff and is
mm,
super um, theatrical with his comedy. It got his long red hair and his crazy bandana and stuff. And it was, I don't know, something about just life in general and seeing what he's done and hearing his TED talk about insecurities. I was like, okay, I'm safe now. I'm not 5 anymore. I can be
ooh,
me and
ooh,
do the things I need to do. And so
mm.
I was terrified of my curly hair. I've never grown my hair out in my life,
Oh, wow.
ever. I was always second guessing myself and insecure. And so here I am, 36 years old, right? 35 when I started to
Mm,
go through this, like, you know what? Like you
mm,
said, my skill sets, part of them were meant for seasons and
mm,
processes or things I developed as a shield.
mhm,
Part of them will help me on what I'm really meant to do. But a
mhm,
lot of what I'm really meant to do is behind the scenes of like that crazy, that nurture, that being willing to own the passions that
mm.
I buried for so many years. I don't think I'm the only one who did that.
Well,
And it's
absolutely
like,
not. Like we all have to hug our inner child. Like I hug little Thea all the time. I'm like, it's okay. You can express that now. Like you don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to dim that light just because you grew up with this experience. It's like we have to almost reparent our ways and ourselves in some ways.
absolutely. And that's that face of change, right? There's positive change, there's negative change, that exists there. And so, um, when how do you know the difference? And how do you embrace positive changes when it can feel scary to do it?
Whew. It's interesting. I guess okay, part of my own traumas growing up. So like it's the trauma response, I guess, for me to be able to pivot a little bit. Like I can pivot in and out of things really fast. Like I can shift my mindset real quick because I guess like I grew up where, we didn't always have the resources or we didn't always have the food or have the things that we needed. And so I don't know, I just always feel like there's a way to figure something out or there's just a way. So I always
You're a
like
great example of it
move
too.
towards change. Yeah, I always move towards change really quickly. So I don't have a lot of good advice on that because I don't really think about it too
Mm.
much. Like especially if it's bigger like life decisions, yeah. But like when something comes at me, okay, this last 2 weeks, I will say I was kind of like, what the heck is this? And I was like, I'm gonna let myself be down in the dumps today because I don't do that often. But most times it's like a quick pivot. So I
Yeah.
think even when something just comes at me, I just
Oh,
roll with it. I roll
one of
with
the
it.
best
I feel
leadership coaches I've ever talked to said the same thing you did about allowing yourself to go through your rut, right?
Mhm,
And everybody has them, and you can build up to have strengths where your ruts are shorter. But when you have a rut, don't get scared of it, and own it. Allow yourself to realize that that's where you're at, and
mhm,
that's okay. And then you'll find ways to recuperate. So that was beautiful. And then earlier you said it too. You did give me one of those clear answers earlier that I think applies to this, where you said, "Be still."
mhm,
Right. Be still and allow yourself to think through it. So you've had opportunities to pivot. Now you got these websites. You got Goddesshood. You got Messy Goddess too.
mhm.
Talk to me about whichever one you want to. I'm curious about what messy means. Like how that relates, because I can see it, I can feel it, and I already feel like I can already paint with what you've given me.
Yeah.
But I still want to know from the source of truth. What is that?
Well, I was struggling with letting someone go from my life that just had been around for a while. And we were really close, but I was just struggling with letting it go and moving on. Even though we weren't still in the physical, we weren't still like connected or spending time, but you still will, you still think
Yeah.
about people and you're still
Cute.
holding on to things. And so I was really struggling to let some stuff go. And I thought I'd let it go, but I guess I shoved it down deep and I wasn't aware that it was still in there. And so Messy Goddess kind of came about because I was like, okay, I've tried a lot of other things to get move this through. So I was like, let me make some music about this. And it was really me embracing being okay, not being okay. telling the truth, like speaking up, not holding back, being free, and just really letting go, And so Messy Goddess kind of came up through that. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and she's an entrepreneur too, creative. And we were just discussing how hard it can be sometimes to continue to post and share things when you're not okay. And so I've been called to not have as much of a facade up, if that makes sense, and to really
Yes.
like share my stories. And sometimes when
I
you're
just
sharing your
talked
story,
about liking Barney at 5 and feeling bad about it to this day. You're good. We can talk about the
we talk about the best.
mess.
But yeah,
Appreciate
I've
it.
decided to stop always pretending like everything is okay. And that's the mess and the masterpiece. That's the beauty of the human experience. And so that's where Messy Goddess has come from. And I've felt
I
called
love
to
it.
like do some more art and do some more music and collaborate with people. And one of the things I really love to do is spotlighting people. And so I kind of want to use Messy Goddess to bring in other creatives and other collaborators that I want to spotlight that are actually living in their truth and living authentically. Because that is what Goddesshood is about too, is about living authentically and helping people use their authentic voice and find it in a safe space so that their light doesn't get dimmed. And I didn't realize that when I created Goddesshood that I was creating the place that I needed when I was younger, of being able to try my voice out without fear of judgment or fear of rejection, and just trying it out. So people can now come into our voice note community on Goddesshood through Patreon, and they're able to actually get prompts to speak back, literally like voice notes,
Yeah.
with us, and they can play around with their voice without feeling like, oh my god, I'm on social media already, or oh my god, I'm starting a podcast already. They have a place to fail, and then they can go out there and be sharper for it. So I'm just, yeah. And so Patreon, you'll see I'm like sharing a lot of my own stories to kind of encourage people to go there and get raw, get deeper. And so that's what Messy Goddess and Goddesshood are one and the same, but it's
Hmm.
just, I want to spotlight people who are living in the mess but making it a masterpiece. And so
Oh,
yeah, I'm really pumped for that. So yeah.
that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Living in the mess and yet making it a masterpiece,
Yeah.
as is every great artist of all time.
Hmm.
Right, the greats. It's you can't. Again, I was talking with a client about that exact process because he loves to be messy with what he's doing. And in fact, I was talking to Brain Glue, to James Bond about this because he loves to joke and he's hilarious and he loves to incubate things. And I was like, okay, um, James, we need to get you into your artistic room where you can just fling paint everywhere, Jackson Pollock style. Like let's make
Hmm.
sure that happens. And in the art gallery, right, in the public art gallery, you got to have a separation on this to some extent sometimes. Now, sometimes we can run an art gallery that's messy too, right? But there's time and a place, and there's a balance in that process that we usually have to come into. But I love that way that you frame that with to be messy, in the midst of the masterpiece. Like that is,
Yeah.
oh, there's wisdom in that. So you may not know. I've never revealed this publicly. I've told like a handful of people.
Mhm.
I'm working on a music app.
Oh, really? Oh
Um,
my gosh, that's juicy.
yeah,
Okay.
well, it gets juicier because it's right in line with what you're talking about. You struck a chord in the vein for me where you said that about these people who aren't quite ready to get out there. Well, the app is called Rate My Song, and Rate My
Oh,
Song is about anonymously being able to share your music so that people can give positive feedback only based on what they vibe with. And then if you decide that you then want to come out publicly and say, I produced that, you can.
I love
Um,
that.
so yeah, I still got to find some musicians and some tech people who want to pull it off. But a few years
Mm.
now, been kind of incubating the back end processes, just like I do with most entrepreneurial stuff. And that is one of those that I'm really excited. It's to honor exactly what you talked about, the
I
people
love
who
that.
have it within them.
Oh, I love that because it's so okay. This is why I like what we're doing, because it's so counterculture. Like, you have to understand this, because people thrive right now on social media from talking crap about other people and being messy in the comments in the bad way.
I bet.
And so I just love it. It's so counterculture. It's so like going against the grain. Like, oh,
Mark Twain, and everybody's going one way, go the other. That's just kind of
yeah.
me. That's how I've been. And it's, when you learn principles too, right? If some of you are on the fence on that, like, man, I don't know how to do that. I mean, one, start small and be safe. right? You might be in an environment where that's dangerous to do. I don't take for granted that I didn't grow up in the projects. I grew up with some mean cousins, but at the end of the day, they loved me. I did have a gun barrel pointed at my face at one point for what I did. And that, there's lots of things that could have happened, but it's very rare that I was in such an extreme situation where, it's not safe for me to be who I am, especially these days. So be careful with what we're saying generally, but in general, one of the greatest signs of strength and power is the ability to be authentic and the ability to be vulnerable with what it is you're going through. And so if you're a strong person surrounded by a ton of weak individuals who will hold you back, be careful, because the weak people can outnumber you. But if you are a strong person and you surround yourself with other strong people, then you can be in a position to where you can embrace authenticity, you can embrace vulnerability, and then you can have superpowers to be able to do the things you've always wanted to do. And greater results typically come from those individuals. Plus, you sleep well at night. So join us on that. If you hear that, come and join us. Be our guest on Vision Pros. Tap into what Thea is building at goddesshood.co and at messygoddess.com. That's going to be fun to see. How do men fall into this equation, Thea? I'm trying to
actually, this is what's gonna happen. Okay, well, I'm projecting this. I don't know if she's gonna. I don't know if she's gonna go for it yet, but I think she will. So I told you I'm trying to do more fun and more collabs. And there was a woman, I actually had her read my birth chart, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to hop on Instagram Live and I can break down your birth chart for you?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely, I'll open myself up for that." And she said something towards the end of the live. She was like, "I hope that you and I can help many women together and many other people of gender identities." And I was like, oh, that is so divine, because I had the Miseducation of Masculinity podcast, but I've often struggled with knowing what to do with men, or having a block around how to actually help men because of just some personal things. And so I was like, maybe I'll do that when I have someone that I trust that can help me with it, so I don't have to do it all by myself, And so when she said that, I was like, okay, maybe she can help me with that. So yeah, we'll get there eventually. I'm sure I'm not turning men away.
No, of course not. But we have to be respectful, right, of the cultures that exist and the vibes that exist. And so the inclusivity and equity and diversity stuff, that's a sacred subject. It's a hard one to understand fully. So what you're building, we'll honor that. But if the clear door becomes open, hey, look, here this is, or on involvement, then I'm pretty sure there's a lot of men who probably heard this who are like, man, this really resonates with what I'm doing too. But I know they'll want to be just as respectful in terms of all right, how do we support this? And maybe the support that needs to exist there is just the women that we know, right? Who we want to see be able to step into this type of light. I got 5 older sisters and my mom, and I'm always looking for solutions for how do I improve and help them with their lives, because I care about them. So thank you for being a leader who's doing something amazing for so many people out there, and for blessing us with the wisdom of leadership today. We'll have, once again, in the show notes, we'll have the action steps so that you guys can know how to connect and do things with Thea and Goddesshood. We'll also have the resources that we mentioned on today's show. There's a couple that came up on today's show that I want to make sure to highlight. And we will see everybody on the next episode of Vision Pros Live. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent